Good morning, everybody. Sorry, we'll try this again. My name is Chris Bear, producer of Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie. And today we are doing OCD Kids Speak Out. I believe this is episode 15. We're going to be talking to Sami, who's had OCD pretty much her whole life. And we can hear about how she's dealt with it through the years and how therapy helped, as well as her new mental health charity, which she launched 2 years ago. So when Sami gets here, I will just invite her on camera. And she should be joining us shortly. And feel free to ask questions, share this out, like and heart. This is an open conversation between Chris and I, but also as well. So let's do it.
Hello, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
All right, let me
throw my headphones in. Hopefully that will get rid of the
Okay.
We'll see if that works. And if not,
No,
try
we'll try that alternate method that I was talking about.
All right, so everybody tell me
if it's rid of the echo. I don't think so.
No.
So it's probably something with
Facebook and or
our phones.
I can try putting in headphones if you think that would help. I don't know.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay.
Sorry,
Sorry, folks.
Little
Little technical
difficulties.
So give us a second.
You never know what's going to happen when I open this app. Facebook makes updates. Phones have changes, so we'll see. But if you have any questions for Sami about how she dealt with OCD and how
therapy works, things like that, that's what we're going to talk about. All right. Let's see.
All right. I don't know if this helped. I gotta get that.
The magic of headphones. I don't hear the
you
echo
don't hear
anymore.
It? Oh, okay, cool.
Nope. You hear an echo? I'm talking off camera to my staff.
Oh.
My kid, my wife's watching in the other room, and I'm just making sure that there's no echo on the broadcast. So thank you, everybody. Welcome. So Sami, I'd love to just get an idea about just like how OCD came into your life, and what were some of the early signs?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with OCD at the age of 3, which is usually very young for that to happen. So sorry. My mom was the one who really recognized it, and she basically just knew. She always kind of tells me a story where we were at the doctor, and she said to the doctor, not a psychologist or anything, just my normal pediatrician, and she said to the doctor, "I think that Sami might have OCD," and the doctor's like, "No, I don't think so. Like, I don't really think so." And then apparently, I started saying something like, one of my I think thoughts, or one of my kind of, I just want to tell you, like, something completely abnormal and just not a normal thing that a little child would say. So the doctor said, "You know what, I think you're right. I think she might have OCD," and that's kind of how I was able to go get diagnosed after that. And in addition, I was able to, kind of try to find a therapist that worked for me, which took a really long time, actually, and I can talk a little bit about that if that's of interest. But yeah, it was just...
Yeah, I have to imagine, you were like so young, and your mom recognized it, so that's really interesting.
Yep.
And the first type of therapy you got involved in, was it like exposure therapy? Was it play therapy? Like, where did you start? Because you were so young.
Yeah. So the first type of therapy was play therapy, which didn't do anything for me. I remember my mom would kind of tell me, she would ask me, how I was doing, even at a very young age, because I was somehow kind of able to communicate my feelings from a young age, and I think a lot of it has to do with my OCD. But she would kind of ask me those things, and I would keep having the OCD habits that I had at a young age, such as kind of, saying thoughts that I was having that were turned into obsessions. That's kind of how it manifested originally. But I think that the main kind of thing that we realized was that that wasn't working, and that happens. And so we kind of were on a mission to find a psychologist that would be the right fit for me. And fortunately, I found one. She specializes in OCD in my hometown. I'm not home right now. I'm at college, but we still do teletherapy. She's awesome. She's amazing, and she's really helped me so much. So, yeah.
What were the you talked about kind of your your thoughts that led the doctor to go, this is interesting. So actually that's Melanie, I guess. I'm sorry. But that question just popped up. How did your mom recognize OCD? You had these thoughts that clicked in the doctor's mind. What were those thoughts, and how was your mom able to pick it up so fast?
So OCD actually runs in my family, unfortunately. So my grandfather had it, but he didn't even know what it was called. He struggled his whole life with it, and apparently I'm very similar, or I'm very similar to how he was. And so then he kind of passed it on to my mom, and so that was how my mom picked it up in me, pretty much.
So that's why you were able to get it diagnosed. And what were your early symptoms, compulsions, obsessions, those type of things? Like, how did it manifest at first?
So when I was really little, it would be in the form of what I called, or what my psychologist called, bad thoughts. So I just remember having these really disturbing obsessions thoughts. Some were like about, what if somebody in my family dies, or just along those lines. Very disturbing things for just a young child to be thinking about. And yeah, it just kind of really affected me on a daily basis, and I wasn't even really able to, enjoy a lot of things because I had these thoughts. And I just remembered the first early memory I had of kind of an intervention for this was drawing out these thoughts, which my psychologist, taught me to do. And I think that this was also really disturbing. I vaguely remember keeping a folder of these drawings, and they were very disturbing to me, so I did not want to look at them. I would put it away, but it kind of helped to draw them out a little bit, and that's kind of a form of exposure too, I guess, now that I know more. But yeah, that was the earliest form. And then after that, it morphed, my OCD morphed into more of the obsession and compulsion-based OCD. So I was actually doing things like retracing my letters, rereading the same sentence over and over again, touching things a certain amount of times that felt okay for me. Washing my hands until they were bleeding, and I've had a lot of different habits that it kind of morphed into. So that was about when I was, I think when I got a little older and when I started to understand a little bit more. So maybe about 9 years old, it became, maybe even a little bit earlier, but it became more obsession based. So not even just bad thoughts anymore. It was, I had to do something to kind of rid myself of that anxiety.
So it almost started in it was like in your head, mental thoughts, mental compulsions, and the drawing out was kind of like trying to get that out of your head, and then it kind of morphed into more physical, outward rituals that you were doing. And it's interesting that you grew, and you're basically talking about from 3 till 9. So we have a whole bunch of stuff more to talk about. But 2 questions. One was was it easier for you to talk about your OCD? You mentioned that it was part of were you seeking reassurance or safety, or did you just feel like I have to tell somebody because I don't like what I feel? Because some people keep it inside.
So I've always been the type of kind of OCD case where I have to tell somebody just to rid myself of the anxiety. I have, I know people that are very the opposite, and they would rather kind of deal with it on their own. But that's just not how I really ever was. And I think it was really helpful also, it was really helpful to have a supportive group of people around me always, because I think that, I did have these thoughts and I did have to kind of get them out and share, even if at a young age I didn't really understand what they were for or why I had to kind of get them out in the first place. But I just knew that that was the only, way in the moment to, reduce that anxiety. So I think I've just always been that kind of external, compulsion kind of case.
Yeah, and also kind of part of the reassurance, like you said. Guys, thank you so much for the questions. This is great. Usually I have lots of questions to ask, but I'm just going to, as long as they're coming in, we'll keep asking them. So another question was it easy for you to, oh no, I would just ask that one. The other question is, do your thoughts switch back and forth? And maybe that's like, it's one time it's harm, one time it's, some, you're afraid of something different or perfectionism. So how do you, how does the OCD manifest and change in you, even perhaps on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I think that that's a really important thought to bring up because, yes, it does switch back and forth, and it has in the past. I think that the important thing to recognize, and that many people do know about OCD, is that it's really not the same in many cases throughout a lifespan. And I think that my case kind of shows it started out as this one thing, which was the bad thoughts stage that I call it. And then it morphed into the compulsion stage. And then as I grew older, and I can touch on this more if anybody's interested, but as I grew older into high school age, I started on the perfectionism OCD side. And I often kind of tell people to explain that I'm not a neat person at all. So that's not the type of perfectionism, for people who may not know as much about OCD. That's not the type of perfectionism that I'm referring to. But instead, this perfectionism was that every, aspect that I deemed important had to be a certain way. So for example, grades was the big obsession in that stage of my life. So, my OCD would switch back and forth. I would still have those, compulsion-based things that I talked about before, habits that would come up. But in addition to that, I had many issues with just studying nonstop and obsessively. And it was often hard for me to recognize it. I'm usually, just because I've had it for so long, I'm usually pretty good at picking up on when something is an OCD thought. And that's, I think, the most important step in, treating OCD is having the person who's suffering recognize that, this is an OCD thought. And I think that even in that stage of my life, I wasn't even really able to recognize, I'm studying for this long, not because I want to do well on this test anymore. It's become an obsession. It's crossed this line into an obsession. So yes, I think things definitely go back and forth, especially with change in my life, starting college too. So yeah, so that's a really good question.
It's interesting you talk about that. I was speaking with Tori last month, and she mentioned similar type of perfectionism where it was just like a drive. Initially it was a drive to get good grades and be perfect and study crazy, and her teacher supported it. It was like, wow, this is great. Everybody, you have to be like Tori, be this great student. And it took her a while to realize, oh my God, like this is a bad thing. This is obsessing. I'm waking up too late. It's totally ruining my life. And all I'm doing is thinking about doing well. So switching topics a little bit. Your family knew, your family was helping. What about your friends? Were you secretive about OCD? Did you talk to them about it? Like, how did you introduce the concept to people outside your family, or even, your friends, and how did they react?
So yeah, I've always been pretty open about my OCD, and not too open originally, just because I recognized that there was this stigma from a very early age, and I originally was a little bit afraid of that, because I didn't want my OCD to kind of define my entire life, and it really was at first. But then I realized that, I didn't want to kind of feed into the stigma, and I had to make this decision to kind of open up and to ask for help when I needed it. So yes, my close friends definitely know about my OCD, and I kind of introduced the idea. They just know at this point, I guess, because of the advocacy and because of, you know, how it's become a part of my life in a different way, almost not taking over my life, but I see it as something that is an important mission for me in my life to kind of spread awareness, I guess. But it's in a very different way than I once was afraid of. And I don't, you know, I get really upset when I hear that, you know, people, you know, are afraid to open up because they're afraid of what other people might say. And I definitely know that's a very real thing. Like people will judge sometimes, and people will say, oh, you can't do this because, you know, because of your OCD or because of your any really mental illness that you can't see on the outside. So I think it's just really important, you know, to kind of start that conversation, which is why I decided to open up. But I definitely recognize that there's a lot of people who, you know, who can't do that. And a good example that I've kind of learned on my way is that when I applied to college, that's when I was working on my charity event that I'll talk about a little bit later. But I think that I kind of had to make this decision to open up, even on my college application, to write an essay about not having OCD so much, but what I've done with it. And I recognize that, you know, some people might not understand that, and it's a risk that you take. But I think that this is really important to me, and just opening up about it is important in my life. So.
Oh, no doubt. And, you know, for a lot of people, I think they have to be somewhat comfortable with talking about it, feel comfortable with themselves. Then it's like, who do I tell, and how big does the story get? And then understanding that when you tell somebody, there's also, you have to educate them and understand that they might initially be like, oh, how can I help? What can I do? What can I do? And then you almost have to become the educator, if you will, say, I might do this, you know, or you know, I just want you to be aware of it, or if we go out or something like that, you know, you kind of have to be comfortable with it, and then telling others how they can help, because generally friends want to be able to be supportive and you know, aware. So I had a question early on about, you know, you mentioned you're in college. How did the transition go? And you know, what's that been like, kind of moving from, you know, out of the home to home and dealing with your OCD in college?
Yeah, so I think it's been definitely a challenge. So I'm about 6 hours away from home at college, and it's been challenging. It's been a big change, a big transition, and with any really big transition comes a transition for my OCD usually. And so I had to leave behind a lot of my loved ones and a lot of the things that I was used to and that I had built a routine around, to try to change things, and also to kind of be on my own, which is a challenge for me just because I, you know, I've had such an amazing support system, and I definitely still do, but it kind of has transitioned with me as I've been at college. So I would say that it was very difficult. My OCD definitely hit a spike. I started seeing a therapist here. I see my psychologist on Teletherapy, which has been really helpful. But I think that something...
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Guys, Teletherapy is like just kind of doing what we do. You do like a FaceTime or a Skype with your therapist, and you're talking through it, but it's just done via phone.
Yep.
Just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think that it's been really important just to take care of myself and to just be aware, like when I need to maybe step back from something, when I might have an activity to do after classes, or I might have said, you know, I'm going to go to the gym today. And some days that's really helpful for me, but some days it's not as helpful. And to just kind of be aware of myself and to realize what I need. Maybe I need to talk to my mom or my friends, or maybe I need to just chill out for the night or something like that. That's been really helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, you know, everybody in general needs to be aware of and in the moment as much as possible to how they're feeling and how stress reacts to it. And certainly transition, everybody's affected by change, whether it's moving, going to a new school, going to a new job, friends. So there is that inherent stress in any new situation. And then when you throw OCD on top of it, you almost have to be more hyper aware. Right. Guys, this is OCD Kids Speak Out. I'm talking with Sami. We're talking about OCD. She's had it from a little kid. Now she's in college, so there's lots of different things you can ask questions about. Feel free to share this. and questions are pouring in, so this is awesome. And yes, we will very soon talk about her charity, which, so, she's gone from somebody who, was getting help, needed help, has come a little more to a stronger point in her life, and now she's kind of trying to give back with a couple of different charities that she's doing. So Jen and Alyssa and Jennifer and Maureen, thank you so much for your comments. So I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned therapy and getting to a therapist. Like, what did they tell you about OCD? How did they explain it to you? And then, what were some of the exposure therapies that you started to learn about?
Yeah, so basically, I'll talk about my main therapist now mostly. So when we started with cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And basically what that is just getting your mind to question your thoughts, and kind of not always believe everything. Because I think that one of the most challenging things with OCD, and why I think it's such a debilitating disorder, is because it tries to trick you a lot. And it's kind of like a bully in your mind, and it tries to say, this is really important, you need to give all your attention to this right now, you need to pay attention to this right now, when in reality that's really not always true. It might be your OCD speaking. So one thing that kind of came out of that for me was kind of a mindset shift that I'll also talk about a little bit after this, but a mindset shift that kind of, I am Sami, and then this is my OCD. So sometimes Sami wants to do something, and sometimes my OCD wants Sami to do something, and kind of realizing that they're two different things a lot of times, and realizing, where is this thought coming from? Is this coming from Sami wanted to do this, or her OCD wanted her to do this or take this path? So that's CBT, kind of questioning that, as I see it, really. And then we move towards exposure therapy, which is when you have kind of a compulsion side of it. So for example, when I had to wash my hands repeatedly because I thought that there were germs all over my hands all the time, and I would just have to wash them all the time. One of the helpful things that my psychologist helped me do was, be exposed to germs on purpose. And that was really challenging. And, it goes along with every kind of different compulsion that you can have. But I think that that's just really challenging. And then the last type of therapy that's relatively new that I've moved into now that I'm in college, and that I'm older and I've kind of learned to understand OCD a little bit more, is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is relatively new. I think certain psychologists will try to move into that realm, where you accept a thought as it is and you try to commit to it being there, and not necessarily pushing away the thought, but just commit to saying, thank you, thank you for that thought. I appreciate it. I don't need it right now, but thank you. And not trying to fight away the thought so much. So I think those are the important kinds of therapy that I've encountered so far.
Yeah, and what you're kind of getting at is that, through over time, and this, what we're talking about here is years and months worth of hard work. It's not just like it snaps. Sometimes it can, but you're usually ramping up to that, to recognizing an OCD thought. This side of my brain is not OCD. This is an OCD thought. This isn't. Not saying it's a left-right thing.
Yeah.
What is and what isn't, and maybe this is just stress versus an OCD stress. Then it's the therapy and dealing with exposures, which also take a very long time. Let's say you're washing your hands for 20 minutes. It's washing your hands maybe for 19 minutes, 45 seconds, and then being okay with that anxiety. And then, like you said, ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. I know there was a lot of talk about that at the OCD conference this July. I think that is really ramping up, and I can see how people over time need more than just what works now, because it may not work in the future. So now you're doing a combination of it. So a question is, when you transition from, you as a youngster, your family was probably helping you more with exposures and therapy, to kind of being a teenager and an adult and you doing the therapy and being more independent. Like, how did that work, and how old were you when that started to happen? Where, it was like maybe your parents were leading, or your family and therapists were leading your therapist, and then you had to take charge. Like, how did that work? And
yeah, so I kind of think that OCD is sometimes a full-time job, really. It's a lot of hard work, and that hard work started from a very young age for me. And as you said, kind of like the helping with exposure with my parents, just an example that I really have is that a lot of times with exposure, or for me at least, or cognitive behavioral therapy too, there's kind of homework assignments that you have to take home that are very clear. For a lot of young people, I think with OCD, this is probably a similar experience. But when I had to work on something, I just remember my dad would say, okay, let's come up with this reward system almost. So like if you succeed in this small way, because I think it's also important to celebrate those even tiny victories, like you said, like if you want to wash your hands for 20 minutes and you get it down to 19 minutes and 45 seconds, to celebrate those small victories. And, like maybe there's a small incentive and then a medium incentive. And so that was kind of a very young way of me understanding my OCD and being able to cope with it. As I grew up, there weren't those rewards anymore. The rewards were, or those external rewards, the rewards were kind of intrinsic and in my own mind. And I recognized that when I had a small victory, I was moving towards kind of, being able to live on a daily basis without, not without completely, but, in a better way and improving almost my own quality of life. And I think that's something that's also really important to mention, is that it can be really hard, I think, through all stages of mental illness and OCD especially too, for loved ones to kind of come to an understanding of it. I think that not only have I gone through a journey of OCD, but so has my family. And, because my mom is kind of affected by it too, she understood a lot more. But my dad had to kind of go through this period of coming with me to therapy, understanding things. And it was really hard for him too, because as a father, he wanted me to be happy and to, enjoy my life. And which is why I love, the documentary so much, because I think it takes that standpoint. Thanks. Of course, it takes that standpoint of exploring, what, siblings think, what others think, and how their journey of OCD, supporting that, comes so far. And I think that my dad now, he really has come to understand and be there for me, and know that, like, oh, he just joined, but know that, sometimes you will have good days, sometimes you'll have bad days, and you can't always fix it as a loved one. You can't always snap your fingers and be like, okay, I made this better for you. So you can't do that. You could just be there for a hug. Just say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. I understand. So I think that's an important thing to mention too.
Yeah, getting the family involved, we're big on that. Yeah. We think a family that fights OCD together beats OCD together. We had a question earlier about schooling. Because you dealt with it through elementary, middle, high school. Did you go to like the regular public schools, or did you feel like you needed to go to like either a private or a special school in order to help deal with that?
Yeah. So
do you deal with OCD in school?
So yeah, I've always dealt with OCD in school, since I was little. And I've always gone to the regular public schools, been pretty much treated how, all the other kids have been treated. I've just kind of wanted it that way, I think, from a young age. I didn't, although sometimes things were helpful, certain accommodations might have been helpful. And I would do those things, like, for example, moving away from the rest of the class during an exam or a test or something like that. But for the most part, I've kind of been there with everyone else, and recognizing, I remember when I was in first grade, I wasn't even really able to participate in the class. We had a standardized test, for example, and I wasn't able to take it because I would retrace my letters, I would reread the same sentence, and I just wasn't able to participate in that, and it wasn't able to assess the knowledge that was really in my mind. And as I moved on, I learned ways through therapy, through that hard work, and through medication also, which I started a lot later because I didn't want to start that immediately, which was a personal choice. But yeah, through all of those things, I've kind of learned how to help myself in school and to be able to, you know, be a student as well as someone suffering with OCD, but be a student and be all of those things, a friend, everything like that.
Did teachers get involved? Like, did your family have to sit down and talk to your teachers about this is, you know, please notice this, or she's going to take a long time to finish a math problem, so you have to push her or tell her not to be perfect, or like to work on, you know, how would school or teachers, or did they get involved at all each year?
So pretty much, I think the only really teachers that knew about my OCD were when I was in those early grades, like first grade. But after that, my teachers didn't really know. And you know, I took advantage of the guidance counselors a lot. I would go there if I was having a particularly challenging day and I just felt as though I couldn't really, you know, do something, and I not really do something, but I needed to take a little break and I needed to just you know, sit in my thoughts. But my teachers didn't know. No, they didn't provide any sort of accommodations in that way, but and I kind of wanted it that way because I figured I would tell them if I needed to, but I wanted to kind of try to deal with it on my own for the most part, I think.
Yeah, I know a lot of organizations like the IOCDF and intrusivethoughts.org are all preparing documents and websites to help deal with teachers and parents deal with anxiety in the classroom.
Yeah.
Amy's asking, Amy, thank you for your question. One, did you name OCD when you were younger? And I can say that most of the kids in the film, including my daughter, did have a name for OCD, different things. You know, so in addition to the name OCD, kind of giving it an idea, what was the hardest thing for you to overcome? What certain OCD issue?
Yeah, so I did name my OCD kind of, I would call it my brain bully, which I saw that I think someone else said,
Yes.
which is, I think, had been a really helpful visual for me because I think probably just the hardest, there's not one particular thing I think that was the hardest compulsion or the hardest obsession, but I think just in general, it's knowing that, you know, that bully is just going to be there and you have to not give it the attention that you might want to. So for example, you know, it tells me things all the time. I go to my classes, it's talking to me. It's telling me, Sami, you need to pay attention to this. You need to do this right now. You need to go tell this person this thing. It's telling me things all the time. And, you know, it's just kind of recognizing that that's going to be there. And again, just saying, thank you for bringing this up to my attention, but I'm going to go to class now, but you know, maybe we could talk later or something like that. And just kind of understanding that it's always going to be there and it's always going to be really tiring because it's that constant cycle in your mind. And I do get really tired a lot because of that. But I think it's just recognizing that and being able to kind of sit with that uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, you're like mentally exhausted because you're completely compartmentalizing and you're dealing with, you know, the inputs that teachers and school is giving you, the things you have to do in your life, whether you're eat and homework and dry cleaning or whatever. And then it's, you know, the OCD bugging you every chance you get. So one question I have based on that last question was like, was there a significant victory that you point to, or maybe your first victory and you go, yeah, that's how I realized that I can beat OCD?
So I think, I'm trying to think. I can't really remember a specific victory, and I think the reason why is because I was so young, and I almost think that it was the victory that, you know, that helped me realize that I could do this was that I realized I could beat any habit, really. I realized that certain habits were really hard. So for example, I used to have to say things to other people, maybe say I'm sorry all the time, just for example. And that was really hard for me because that involves other people, and that was me kind of, you know, that was a very important value to me, to be truthful and to be truthful with people and to be moral. And I think that just knowing that I could get past things like that was really a success, but also knowing that my support system would celebrate with me. So, for example, my parents would really try to congratulate me almost on passing these small victories, because I didn't always really realize what a great accomplishment it is to kind of move past that. And I think that it can be really tiring, because sometimes I do feel like once I resolve a certain habit or ritual, a new one comes along. And I think it's just realizing that you can always work on something, even if it doesn't seem like it in the moment, because there's many times per day that I think, wow, I really can't deal with this right now. I don't know if this is going to go away. But they always somehow find their way with that therapy and with that hard work and that support system. So I think that is the victories that I've kind of come to realize.
Yeah, and as you were touching on before, and when you're dealing with your personal victories, a lot of times with parents, therapists will tell you, give an incentive, whether it's something small that kid can earn every day, or something big they can really look forward to when they overcome something really hard for them. And those are some of the outward ways parents can help. But there is that kind of recognition of the person with OCD going, I have to deal with this myself, and sometimes the issue's happening in here and nobody around you knows it. So when you have that victory, recognizing yourself and giving yourself the credit and allowing yourself to go, good job, me. And Jen, I appreciate that. Yes, hopefully, I think schools are the big issue. I mean, one of the things that we found frustrating when we released the film was that it was just so hard to get into schools, and schools have budgets and other crises that they're dealing with, and there's so many different issues that all the kids have. So the more resources that are around, we've partnered with the OCD Foundation. Some of the videos that we created after the film was made will be on the next generation of the anxiety in the classroom website. So there's certain things that we realized that, if we partner with other people, it'll be a little bit easier to help. So I would love to kind of talk about you decided a couple of years ago, I'm going to do something about this. I want to help other people. I want to spread the word about mental health, and you started a charity. And then tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I decided that I think it's important to start the conversation about mental health. So that was kind of the foundation. And I'm also, so just a background, I'm also a cyclist, and I go out with a team at home. I live in New Jersey, so I go out with a team there a lot, especially during the summer. And we would do these charity rides that, for example, if anybody has ever heard of the American Cancer Society ride, or the MS 150 ride is a really common one. And I realized that a lot of these events were very outward focused disabilities and diseases that they were focusing on. And I noticed that there wasn't really anything for, that mental health aspect of it that people can't really see, but you can kind of still feel on a daily basis. And those people needed something, I felt, to kind of connect them to something in the community like that. So I started Move for Mental Health, which started as a charity bike ride. And the first year that we did it was in 2017. And it was such a success. And I just was so surprised. There were about 140 riders that attended.
Wow.
And there were 30 volunteers, I believe, about that number. And basically, I think the biggest success of that event was people came up to me at the event, before the event, when I was kind of marketing it. And they came up to me and they said, I've never really told anybody this before, but I feel very comfortable, and I want to share with you why I'm here, and why I think this is a really important thing that's in our community. And that just was probably one of the greatest things that I could have ever expected. I actually never expected anybody to come up to me like that. But I think
it kind of goes to what you were talking about earlier, where, almost when you're talking about your issue with family, friends, and how they react, there's a an acceptance that people have, and suddenly they feel they can open up to you. And
Yeah.
then by doing this charity ride, that same thing happened on a grander scale.
Yeah. And I think that was important. And I think they were asking questions. They really wanted to know, how can I help someone who I know is suffering? How can I help myself? And those were the types of things that I wanted people to get out of this. And so, you know, this year we decided to restart it. And it's been a challenge because the first year that we did it, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of administrative work, especially it being a bike ride event. We had to get countless things approved by countless different people.
Permits,
Yeah.
emergency services,
Yeah.
you know, medical stuff.
Yeah, and I kind of, as a high school student, I kind of took the lead on that and met with many different people, got everything kind of set up, even everything from reserving the location to getting porta potties, things like that. You know, I would meet with a lot of different people. And starting college, I was worried because I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have the time to do that administrative work, but I still think that this is really important. And I think that, you know, also my journey with my dad has come full circle because he was the one who stepped up and said, you know what, Sami, I want to kind of take over that administrative work because I think that this is really important. And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, so he has been doing a lot of the administrative work. I've been doing still a lot of the promotion work and the message behind the ride, which I think is a really important thing. And this year we're introducing a walk too, a 1 mile fun walk. So for people who might not be a bike rider, but they still want to get involved, which we heard a lot of at the last event, you know, still join us. And you can go to our website also to find out more information. I'll just put that out there now.
Yeah, and in the comments,
Yeah.
I should say that we will throw that in the comments.
Yeah.
And after this, both of us will go through and answer questions, but we'll certainly put links to your Facebook page as well as the website. So if you're interested, want to donate, you certainly can.
Yep. Yeah. So the website is just moveformentalhealth.org. So if, you know, if anybody wants to check it out, that'd be great. You can register, you can volunteer, you can donate, you can check out more information about my story, check out more information about others and just OCD in general or mental health in general, because it is for, you know, all mental health really. And yeah, I think it's just, I'm really excited for it this year. I think it's going to be a great event. And so, yeah.
That's fantastic. So 2 questions that we got, and I think there's a kind of a general question of any advice you would give somebody who has OCD that can kind of help them either, you know, steer them in the right path or deal with what's going on in their head.
So any advice? I would say that it's really important if you need to seek help. I think that's really important. And that's actually one of the main reasons too that I decided to start this ride, because I realized that many people either can't reach out for help because of maybe financial reasons or because of insurance reasons or things like that, or they can't reach out for help because they feel they can't, because there's a stigma tied to it. And I think that it's really important to not have to suffer alone and to kind of build a support system, which has been like probably the most important thing for me. And I also think that recognizing that, you know, there is kind of a bully in your brain that is bossing you around, and to recognize that you don't have to listen to everything it says, even when it feels like you do, because I think a lot of times every single day you'll wake up and you'll say, oh my gosh, you know, it's telling me this, it's telling me that, I can't deal with it right now. But I think just recognizing in general that, you know, it's going to be there. It's probably going to be there for a while, but recognizing that it's okay to keep moving on and it's okay to be you and to keep doing the things that you love, rather than giving into everything that your OCD is telling you to do, if that makes any sense.
No, I think so, absolutely. And it kind of touches on something that we talk about in our home, which is like, every day you have to do something. Yeah. Some days you're going to feel strong, and those days you should push yourself. Days that you don't feel strong, you feel weak, your anxiety is harder, do something, even a small victory. So there are days when we try to do exposures that are a 9, and some days the next day we might do a 2 because of other things. My daughter doesn't feel as strong. And that, you know, in some ways that goes in anything in life. In exercise, sometimes there are days you feel great, push it to the extra mile. Days that you're just really struggling, you just do what you can.
Yeah.
But try to have a little victory, you know, every single day, and understand that, you know, it's it's a long race as opposed to a sprint. So a question from Michelle about dealing with uncertainty. Her child's compulsion is kind of to prevent the bad things from happening. You know, that the belief that, and I think, Michelle, this is what you're touching on, the belief that, like, if I think something or do something, that won't happen to some other people, kind of magical thinking type thing.
Yeah.
Advice for kind of coping and how to deal with that uncertainty, that, like, how do I know this thing's not going to happen?
Yeah. So I think that, so I've personally had a lot of that in my life. Uncertainty has been probably the foundation of all of my OCD, thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? And, you know, it sounds really crazy to other people. Like, two things that are not connected at all might, in my mind, be completely connected. Like, for example, this is just a kind of a basic example of a long time ago, the thinking that I had, if I don't touch this, you know, if I don't touch my water bottle 5 times in a certain way, then somebody in my family might get hurt and it would be my fault. And I'm uncertain about that. So I'm just going to do that and then solve that uncertainty. So that's kind of the mindset that I think that, you know, you might be touching on. But, and that's a really hard mindset to get past, I think. But just knowing that, trying to separate those two things really helped me, and trying to kind of logically, maybe not even logically go through it, but trying to kind of understand that, you know, that's always going to be there, and there's going to be uncertainty. Like, I'm going to go through the day and I'm not going to know what's going to happen. I'm not going to know what's going to happen in 5 years. I'm not going to know what's going to happen in the far future. But just knowing that that's a part of everybody's life, uncertainty, and, you know, being kind of, and I know it's, you know, not helpful to say just being okay with it, because trust me, I know that it's very, very hard to just be okay with it. But to go through and kind of understand that, you know, there is going to be uncertainty, and to kind of accept that and to commit to letting that be in your head. And I think it makes me stronger every single day to realize that, you know, that's going to live in my mind, but I'm going to keep going on, and I'm going to keep doing, you know, what I love to do and what I meant to do and what I want to do, even though that's there. So.
Yeah, we've, one of the things that we talk about a lot is OCD never tells the truth. And, you know, repeating that early and often, and no matter what new issue pops up, it's like, well, let's, you know, a lot of rational, you know, linear conversations don't really work. The logic doesn't necessarily always work in someone with OCD, and therefore it's like, you know, let's prove. So in my own life, it's like, let's prove OCD is wrong. Show me when it's ever been right. And there's been times where, you know, it's like whether you're touching something or you say, let's think the other thing, or OCD says this is going to hurt you, then we're going to touch it.
We're going to do it,
And then you're showing, and this is like, again, it's repeated over time. You're kind of retraining the brain to understand that, like, it's a liar, and it's going to keep trying to find new ways to lie to you. And that's what happens.
And I think like, just I saw one of your t-shirts that you guys sell, and I think it said, I love with uncertainty or something like that. And that, I just loved that so much. I was like, wow, that I've never even seen something that, that speaks so much to me. And I think just going on with your days with uncertainty is really, really hard, but kind of knowing, you know, let's do that and let's see what happens, is really important too.
So, yeah, I know that, just dealing with, I just don't know, and that's A-okay. So I had a question. Oh, you know what I wanted to ask, because we've got to talk about the bike ride that's going to happen this year, and the walk. When are they? In the spring, summer? You know, like, so people understand, you know, when it's going to be, and it's going to be in New Jersey.
Yes, so it's in New Jersey. It's going to take place at Laurel Acres Park in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. It's on June 2nd, so it's kind of in the summerish time. And yeah, we're just looking for anybody who wants to come. If you do, I'll just put a quick plug out there. If you do sign up before March 31st, with the code START Conversation, which you'll see on our website when you visit, you get $5 off the cost of registration for either walkers or cyclists. So that's something that, you know, you might want to take advantage of. We love early registrations. Helps us out a lot. And this year's theme, I think it's important to touch on a little bit is starting the conversation. And we're emphasizing a lot. We're asking people if they're willing, because of course, if you're not willing, it's totally fine. And we're not going to like, you know, there's going to be some activities centered around this at the bike ride. We're trying to make it more interactive and learning oriented for especially the walkers who are going to stick around the pavilion, which we call it at Laurel Acres, a lot of the event. I moved for mental health because, so we're asking people, because this is what I've noticed with the last event, a lot of people wanted to share, and a lot of people felt comfortable sharing. And of course, if you don't, that's totally fine. No, nothing, you know, it's going to happen or anything. But, you know, why do you move for mental health? Maybe it's for a loved one because you want to support them. Maybe it's because you want to learn more about mental health and mental illness. Maybe it's because you yourself struggle with mental illness on a daily basis, and
Right.
you want to become stronger, and you want to learn ways that you can kind of overcome a lot of that. So yeah, that's kind of the theme, and that's June 2nd is the date. So all the information's on our website too.
And I'm just thinking of this now, given New Jersey, OCD New Jersey is a fantastic organization. I don't know if you know Dr. Alan Wegg. So have you reached out to them? Because they would certainly help promote it, and who knows, they might be able to like actually be, you know, at the event and have a tent or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes. So the quick answer is well, not the quick answer, but I actually did years ago, I think it was maybe like 5 years ago, maybe less. I did a panel with them I think it was for like practitioners and also families with OCD, and they just asked questions much like this, but there were a whole panel of people there, all ages really. And so we're trying to get different, you know, types of, you know, mental illnesses, different perspectives to come and be at the event. So that's definitely one that's on my list, and one that's very important to me for obvious reasons. But I should mention also that the proceeds from this year's event will be going to, or many of the proceeds will be going to King's Crusade, which is a community nonprofit dedicated to addiction, which can go hand in hand with a lot of mental disorders, which we recognize and which we're going to talk about more at the event. But also just because there's different reasons that people will attend the event. Not all of them will come for addiction, and that's okay, because, you know, there's different reasons, and we want to celebrate all of those reasons, really. That's just, we kind of change our charity that we donate to by mental illness year by year. So, you know, who knows, next year it might be an OCD foundation. Before it was the Mental Health Association, our local chapter in southwestern New Jersey, it was called. So we kind of switch it up every year, and we want to kind of give attention to all kind of mental illness and just all ways it manifests. So
yeah, and it's a bigger goal to get conversations started, and that should happen with every mental illness.
Exactly.
So Malia and Jen, yes, thank you for your comments. Sami, this has been an incredible hour. I know we're going to wrap it up shortly. I have a couple more questions for you, but I really appreciate it. I'm a parent of a child with OCD, so these things, while I love that it shares learning and knowledge for everybody's viewers, but I also learned something from all these things, and how we deal with OCD in our house. So this is fantastic. And so that leads me into Maureen's comment, which is, you know, from your perspective, how can parents stop accommodating and, you know, deal with not accommodating so much with their child's OCD?
So that's a really difficult thing, and something that my parents especially have had to just deal with on a daily basis. And it's hurtful. It's very hurtful to see your child struggling with anything, but especially struggling with something that you want to help with and you want to tangibly take away from them, and to be, you know, to just take that pain, I guess, away from them that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And that's not always possible, and recognizing that. And it sounds so sad, and it just sounds like, you know, it sounds like a terrible thing, but in the long run, it will help, and it will help everybody involved. Just kind of being there as a figure to provide strength and to provide a hug, or just to provide guidance in that way, instead of trying to take away the pain, trying to be there to support your child's efforts to, you know, have that OCD journey themselves, I think is really important without kind of detaching yourself from that pain, I guess, that it causes for others too.
I mean, one way we have tried to work on accommodating in our home, we actually would start with a conversation and talking about something. So if my daughter was going to start an exposure on something, it was like, okay, just so you know, next week, we're only going to spend 5 minutes in bed with you, and then we're leaving. And then remember, next week or next Tuesday. So we would start almost with a conversation, and then in the action, then it's like you're doing the event and you're reminding them that this is going to happen. And you pull back really slowly. The same way an exposure is kind of working up to anxiety, you're pulling back. So I don't think no one's saying you can't accommodate cold turkey.
Oh yeah, no, not cold turkey, but yeah.
And it's not necessarily like you're going to, pick one thing and work on that. And, if I have a suggestion, it's pick the thing that is most disruptive in your life, or most disruptive in your child's life, and work on that first, and try to deal with the other things later. We had to get very comfortable with my daughter. She used to seek a lot of reassurance. She still does sometimes, but it was like she would ask these questions and we had to say maybe, maybe not.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Who's asking that question? So you might get a question like, am I going to die tonight? And it's really hard for a parent to hear that, but sometimes you have to say maybe, maybe not, because you know who's answering that question.
You know that the OCD is asking. Yeah.
Yeah, so it takes time. So you mentioned your father and him kind of learning and understanding OCD, which leads me to come on my last question.
Yeah.
Any books, things you read, things you have seen that helped you share what was going on in your head to explain OCD to other people that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I would say actually the main one was this documentary. My dad watched it on his own. Originally I went with my mom. There was like a screening of the documentary from my psychologist's office. And my dad watched it on his own, and he came up to me and was like, I'm always so impressed, but like this just really opened my eyes to this even more. And I think that, everybody should watch this documentary. And I just think honestly, for everybody affected by mental illness, or everybody who kind of, sees it or doesn't even see it, it can teach you something that you didn't know. It even taught me things that it even showed me connections that I didn't even know I had. And another one that I would really recommend is the book Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I loved that book. I really connected to it. It's about a girl with OCD. I don't know if they specifically call it OCD in the book, but that is what it's about. John Green.
Right.
John Green is a famous author. He struggles himself with OCD, and he's kind of come out and shared his story, and he published this book. It's awesome. It's really, in my eyes, it's a really accurate representation, and I think those are kind of two pieces of media that are really helpful and great.
Well, thank you so much for including the film in that, and Turtles on the Way Down. It's great. And I will just say we have a huge list of resources, books, organizations, people you can talk to, video series that you can watch on our website, OCD Kids Movie, OCD resources. And we're continually updating that because we find parents, kids, everybody needs somewhere to go to find their specific issue or something that can help you. You never know what's going to click. So Sami, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Sorry it took you a little longer. We went a little longer than I said, but it was great questions on everybody listening. And guys, if you if you're watching this in the replay, feel free to add a comment. We will keep watching this. This will stay up on our Facebook page, and I'll also throw up on YouTube later this week. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. My name is Chris Bear, again, producer of Unstuck Kids Speak Out. We'll be back next Saturday with our first UK guest. So it's an early morning, but I'm looking forward to that. And thank you, everybody, for watching, and talk to you soon.